Welcome to Dementia Dialogue. Stories bring us together and help us to understand one another. Our podcast gives people with lived experience of dementia a way to share their stories with each other and the broader community in order to increase understanding and connection and decrease stigma. In this episode of Dementia Dialogue, we kick off our Risk of Going Missing series. We begin with a conversation between Dr. Noelannah Neubauer, a researcher from the University of Waterloo, and Jillian McConnell, guest host and knowledge translation specialist with brainXchange. Dr. Neubauer and Jillian discuss a toolkit she and her colleagues have created to help people with dementia and their care partners understand the risk of becoming lost due to dementia-related changes, as well as some helpful strategies to address these risks. Let's get started. So welcome, Dr. Neubauer. To get us started, can you tell us about the toolkit to manage the risk of getting lost and going missing for people living with dementia that you and your colleagues created, and why you felt it would be helpful?
Yeah, so this toolkit is aimed to support people living with dementia and their care partners to reduce the risks associated with getting lost and going missing. So this toolkit, we've kept it super simple. It consists of 6 different sections. So first, we introduce 2 case studies. So we have Mary and Ralph and Arnold and Peter, who accompany the reader along with the toolkit. In this section, useful information is provided on how to use the toolkit and the difference between missing and lost incidents, as there are differences between the two. In the second section, we focus on preparing for an emergency, which discusses what a person living with dementia can do when they do go missing and what families can do. And it provides resources that can help in these situations. In the third section, we have how to prevent a missing incident. So it provides resources on how to reduce the risks of getting lost and going missing by really highlighting both high and low tech strategies. And then we have a fourth section, which is focused on improving wayfinding in the home, which provides information on how to improve the ability of a person with dementia to safely navigate in their space. So this includes strategies on lighting, color, and pattern contrast. In the fifth section, other strategies provide strategies on how to promote independence and comfort, as well as autonomy in the home environment for people living with dementia. And these strategies can include things such as how they're able to meet their unmet care needs, and that will in turn reduce the risk of getting lost and going missing. And then in the sixth section, we just have some useful resources. It provides printable resources that were discussed in the toolkit that can be implemented in the home setting. So this toolkit is very much the first of its kind, where it brings together a lot of available resources that are already out there, but puts it into one spot. So then we can further just find those resources fast and then help to reduce these risks of getting lost and going missing.
Excellent. So did you have any other partners or other collaborators who helped in the creation of the toolkit?
Yeah, so this toolkit was very participatory in nature. So right from the beginning, coming up with the initial information of the toolkit through to its different iterations as we're editing, right down to the dissemination. We had persons living with dementia that were absolutely paramount in the development and dissemination of this work. We also included service providers such as the Alzheimer's Society of Canada, search and rescue personnel, and health professionals, as well as researchers. And we also received funding with the support of Public Safety Canada for this work.
So who's the intended audience for the toolkit, and how do you envision it being used?
Yeah, so for the toolkit, we wanted to keep it as generic as possible, just because we know a lot of people could benefit from this work. So the intended audiences do include people living with dementia, because we really want to give them the ability to be able to do things for themselves and be able to help them reduce their own risk of getting lost and going missing. But it's also intended for care partners, first responders, because a lot of times when they get those calls of someone that's missing, they're the first ones to come. So it's good for them to have some education that they can share with family members. As well as frontline staff, health professionals. And then we want to keep it open to the generic public as a whole, because some people have an interest in this area.
And you had mentioned that in the first section of the toolkit, you introduced 2 case studies. So
Mhm.
why was it important to bring those fictional situations of Mary and Ralph and Arnold and Peter to life through the 2 studies that you featured?
Yeah, so being able to feature Mary and Ralph and Arnold and Peter were really important because we're really able to take the materials that were captured and then be able to give real world examples on how these individuals could use these different strategies.
What are some of the ways that we can reduce the risk of a loved one or a person that's important to us becoming lost or going missing?
Yeah, so I'll highlight a couple just because there are, as you mentioned, there's so many that are
Mhm.
out there. And it really is, it's all about giving a try for a couple strategies. And if they fail, to give it a couple other a go. But some of them include things such as door cameras. So more and more do we have cameras like Ring cameras that do have video footage. That can be quite helpful, as well as you can have security systems. A lot of times we already know when the door is open for a security sense. So it helps loved ones be able to understand if a person's going out the door because the door has been opened. There's a big talk around the use of locating technologies. I know that's been a huge hot topic even since I really became involved in this area in 2016. There is GPS devices that are small, like the simple tiles that you can get on Amazon, to those that are a little bit more complex, that are specifically for those that get lost and go missing. It can be in a lanyard, it can be in an insole, or it can be in a watch. And then there's some that are even more and more common that are things such as our phones. So our smartphones have GPS. There are different apps such as Life 360 that family members can simply download. And as long as a person with dementia has that phone on them, then you're able to keep track in terms of where they are. There are some provinces that have a program called Project Lifesaver. It's largely run through the search and rescue personnel. I know Ontario is one of the provinces, as well as BC. They do have Project Lifesaver available. And essentially they use RFID technology. So then the person wears a wristband, and in the event they get lost and go missing, first responders do have the RFID receiver. So it allows them to be able to almost Marco Polo, if you will, as they get closer to the person, then there's a larger noise. So it just helps them be able to find them a lot sooner. There's other strategies that are also, like, in addition to the high tech, you also have some of the low tech that are simple that people can bring in. So simple things for a person living with dementia is that they can just let a family member or a friend know where they're going and what time they're expected to be back, just so it enables them to be able to have a close eye on them. And then as well is that for family members that do live alone, or for individuals with dementia that live alone, just having someone that can check in on them daily can sometimes make a big difference. And then as well, they're able to consider different strategies to help with their navigation. The reasons why individuals living with dementia get lost and go missing is that a lot of times they have a reduced ability to be able to navigate in space. So something that was once familiar, all of a sudden you're getting lost really fast. So being able to find different strategies, even like using Google Maps. I know that us as millennials and other generations now, even when I'm driving to some place that I know I'm going to, I still use Google Maps. So it's a common thing, and it just helps them to be able to not lose their way in space. It helps guide them to where the direction is in terms of where they're going. When it comes to family and friends, some of the lower tech strategies, physical activity is so important. If any of us, if we're sitting around doing nothing all day, we tend to have a little bit of energy, want to be able to move and feel better. So by being able to encourage their loved one, the person living with dementia, to go out for walks, have some more activity, it just helps them feel more calm, less agitated if they're later on in their journey. Being able to integrate activities that are meaningful to them is also important. So being able to find things that they used to like to do when they were younger, whether they were a mechanic and they like to play around with tools, and being able to bring some of that in, it provides more meaning, which then allows them to not necessarily want to go out and potentially get lost and going missing. It allows them, especially in long-term care sites, to just be content because they have things that they can actually do to keep themselves busy.
You had mentioned earlier about wayfinding, and there is a section in the toolkit specifically called wayfinding in the home. So can you
Yeah.
talk about more specifically about what wayfinding is and how it can affect someone that's living with dementia?
Yep. So wayfinding is just, this is how we get from point A to point B. So even where I am right now, if I have to use the bathroom, I know exactly where my bathroom is, and so I'm able to walk there and go to it. However, when you're dealing with those that are living with dementia, again, it's they have that reduced ability to be able to go from point A to point B. It's you kind of have that misconnection. So with wayfinding, essentially, it's being able to use things like going to the bathroom, going to the kitchen becomes quite difficult. And so being able to put in different strategies such as signage makes things a little bit easier, because then rather than trying to find out where the bathroom is, there's signs to point them in that door, rather than you find a door, you think it might be the bathroom, and then they go outside and they're trying to search for it. So it just makes things a little bit easier to be able to meet their needs by allowing them to figure out where things are in their home.
That makes sense. And is there various elements in our homes that can affect wayfinding?
Totally. So there's things such as lighting. A lot of times we don't want the lights to be too bright for someone when they're entering a dark room because it can cause them to become disoriented as their eyes are trying to adapt to the brightness. So task lighting can really help people living with dementia to focus on specific activities such as reading. So just adjusting the lighting to match the time of day or use with natural lighting is helpful, especially when you're looking at long-term care sites where you're constantly having the same lighting on. It becomes quite difficult. So being able to find new ways of being able to manage that is great. There's also color contrast that can have a huge influence. So patterns are not the greatest for being able to help with that. When we were looking at vision changes with those with dementia, low contrast tends to cause a lot of challenges, and it can become a lot worse further on in their journey with dementia. So if you end up using color contrast to help a person locate an object or a room, so for example, if you have a black toilet seat on a white toilet, it helps them identify that that's actually the toilet, because sometimes the toilet, if it's white and the background's white, it all blends in together. Or even doors, everyone seems to paint doors white, but being able to paint it red will allow them to be on against white walls, allows them to be able to signify that that's in fact a door. Other piece is reflections. So textures such as shiny floors and mirrors, they can often cause confusion for those that are living with dementia. So for example, shiny floors can appear as water when they're looking at it on the floor. So they also, persons with dementia may not recognize their reflections in mirrors, which then causes further confusion. So some suggestions for the use of reflections is using low-cost strategies to be able to adapt the home, like covering the mirrors with paper or other matte material, or even just removing the mirror in itself. And then even adding neon tape to floors to emphasize direction, edges on the wall, or even putting neon tape to be able to signify the differences between the different stairs is also of significant help to them. And then, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, the use of signage can be quite easy. And the toolkit does have printable signs that people can bring in. So then it just helps them to be able to meet those needs a lot faster by being able to allow them to find the bathroom or the kitchen, for example, a lot quicker.
There's also a section, and you referred to it briefly in the very beginning of our conversation, on unmet needs. So I imagine an individual's unmet need will vary from person to person, and alternatively could probably vary from day to day with the same individual. So can you explain how an unmet need is related to someone getting lost or going missing?
Yep, completely. So a person living with dementia, they may want to leave the home or the environment subtly because they're trying to meet a particular need or want, and then they become lost in the process. So things such as if they're thirsty, if they need to use the bathroom, those are different things that it's difficult for them to convey if they're hungry or if they have to use the bathroom. And so being able to bring in some different strategies to help them be able to meet those needs are helpful. So some strategies that we've included in the toolkit include people living with dementia may need support for basic hygiene and personal care, including using the toilet. So they may need a prompt to remember to use the toilet or to support them on how to use the toilet because sometimes they forget how to do that process. People living with dementia may also have difficulty in interpreting signs of hunger or thirst, which can lead to them either over or under eating, as well as not drinking enough fluids. It's a continual issue for those that are living in the community as well as in long-term care. So in the toolkit, we provide some suggestions such as creating a schedule for when meals and snacks are available and to make them readily visible on a whiteboard or a sheet of paper posted on the fridge. That way they know that when the food is coming. Another big suggestion is just to be able to offer fluids throughout the day, not just with meals and medications, but just to encourage them to regularly drink. And then to encourage them to be able to sit and have a drink with their meals is also important. Another piece too is people living with dementia may have difficulty communicating whether they are in pain. That is an ongoing problem. I know that there's a lot of research that's going into the woodworks just to try to figure out how we can further help that. But in the interim, signs of pain can include changes in mood, personality, or behavior, such as becoming easily upset, emotional, or withdrawing from social activities. So if you see that, we recommend being able to explore potential sources of pain. So for example, a toothache, a stomach ache, arthritis, or a headache.
The toolkit includes a variety of resources at the end that might be helpful to people. Can you speak to what's included in those resources?
Yep. So there's a couple that we've included. So we have additional contact information from our team because we're involved in lots of different areas. Another key piece is that the Alzheimer's Society of Ontario, they have an amazing identification kit. This kit we typically recommend for those that are at risk of getting lost and going missing, as families can include things such as a photo and some key information that search and rescue and police may be wanting to ask. So by being able to print it off, being able to fill it out, and then just have it and include it. I know a lot of times in home care, care. You have the green sleeve, or you have your goals of care that you keep in your home. So by being able to keep that on your fridge together with everything else, in the event that the person does get lost and goes missing, rather than trying to drastically search for all that information as fast as possible, being able to have that information there, you can just give it to the police, and it just makes things a little bit easier. Another piece too is we also have a variety of different signage that people can print off. So as I was alluding throughout this conversation, is that we have signs for being able to use the bathroom, signs to the kitchen, just things that rather than you creating signs, you could just print it off and use them. And we've designed them in the way where it is more age friendly to the eyes. So typically black and white makes it a little bit difficult for the older eye. So it's actually in black and yellow. So it allows them to see that further contrast to read the signage better.
And of course, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask about where people can find the toolkit. So can you tell us how?
Yeah, so we have a couple ways. So we do have a website. It's www.uwaterloo.ca/mrdpd. That will bring you to the toolkit site, as well as to the site for the other projects associated with this work. And there's different versions too. So you have an English landing page. You can change it to a French landing page, and the toolkit's also available in French. And then you can also just Google toolkit to manage the risk of getting lost and going missing for people living with dementia. Hopefully that will guide that over your way. It'll also be added to the show notes for this podcast.
So thank you so much for sharing your time with us today, Dr. Neubauer. Much appreciated. And I really encourage our listeners to go explore this toolkit. I think they'll find it very helpful for themselves, as well as the person that is living with dementia, their family member, etc. And thank you for creating it, developing it, and as well as to your colleagues and partners in this process.
Of course. Thanks for having us.
Thanks so much.
This Dementia Dialogue episode is released under a partnership of the Alzheimer's Society of Ontario and the Centre for Education and Research on Aging and Health at Lakehead University. The Alzheimer's Society is excited to take on a leadership role in producing and marketing our podcasts to strengthen the voice of people with lived experience of dementia. Please continue to follow us on Facebook. Our web address remains dementiadialogue.ca. We invite you to share your feedback on this episode with us. Please visit our website, dementiadialogue.ca, and click on About and scroll down to find the link to the listener survey. Your feedback helps us as we plan for upcoming episodes. If you wish to receive the survey by email, please send your request to dementiadialogue@alzon.ca. Thanks.